And sort of thinking about that sort of more wider lens and kind of social landscape, how do you think the wider social narrative around men's mental health is evolving? Do you think we're making progress, or are we just repackaging old norms? And that's based on you touching upon the sort of suicide rates and then more diagnosis and I suppose prescriptive solutions to pathological neurosis. But
I would probably say no. I don't think we're making progress. I think the opposite, probably. And I would put that down mostly to the amount of time people spend online, really, and the way that that online content has captured our attention in a sort of catastrophic way. Obviously there are all sorts of benefits and pluses to it, but I think in terms of shaping our identities or shaping the identities of young men, I think it's very difficult. But just because of the way the algorithms work, they reward and reinforce unhealthy dynamics, and so you can see an online influencer who starts out by sort of giving you some really good stuff, on kind of maybe diet and health, or or kind of gaming or so on. But in order for them to continue getting your audience share, there has to be a gradual kind of increase in kind of provocation. Really, it has to kind of keep you sort of coming back, and the only way it does that is by it's a bit like pornography. It never gets more and more vanilla. It only gets more and more hard. That's just how the internet works. That's how gambling works. That's how slot machines work. That's how dopamine work. Variable reward. It doesn't matter if it's good. Doesn't matter if it's bad. The important thing is that something happens that that captures you again and again and again. It doesn't matter if you get a like or a dislike. That's engagement. And there's a really sort of the way that a lot of the sort of big influencers have gone. I mean, even looking at people like Joe Rogan, I think he's still like the biggest podcast there is. I think there's a couple of others which kind of rival it now. You can see quite clearly his drift to sort of a more right-wing stance, but also a much less forgiving, much less compassionate stance. And we need to be forgiving and we need to be compassionate. And that is a big part of being a man, in my view. And you can see how that just subtly gets eroded, and it becomes, a lot about, you see this in comedy, this is one of the, Mark Maron has done some brilliant criticisms of this group recently, it's worth looking up, but he's sort of saying the way that they've tribalized comedy, and really the comedy of culture now is really punching down,
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit gloomy. I mean, I was struggling to find examples of what I thought, good examples of masculinity, in the run up to this. I was thinking, I was trying to sort of think, I did see, I don't know, there's a really good clip of Scott Galloway, who's kind of one of these sort of CEO types, critiquing Elon Musk. It's actually on the Piers Morgan show, but it's maybe we can include it in the show notes or whatever. But his take on kind of, the whole point of prosperity is not to kind of like, is to help others, to support others, to, you become prosperous and powerful to use that power and prosperity to help others, to lift them up, not like Elon Musk, who uses his power and his prosperity to harm others.
Yes, you've got like a combination there of what's, I suppose, deemed as the attention economy plus rampant addiction plus sort of the worst aspects of male ego, power and control, all coalescing all at once, and that's what a lot of our young men are seeing. Let's be honest, Ben, a lot of lost young men are seeing that. It's an easy fix for them, right?